Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Spilling Tea Book Club. I'm Russell.
And I'm Ryan. And today we're going to be talking about The 100 Secret Senses by Amy Tan.
And this book has a lot to talk about. But first, I am going to say a big apology because we are late to make this video, and it is all my fault. I keep postponing, work got crazy, so don't blame Ryan, blame me because it is my fault. But I think it's going to be a pretty fun conversation, Ryan.
Yeah, we already met with our Zoom book club, and we had a really good conversation, I thought, online. So if you've read it and you're thinking about maybe reading this with your own book club, this is a great choice.
It is, absolutely. So as you guys may remember, or if you're new to the Spilling Tea Book Club, we do start with one of us going over a biography of the author, and then one of us will sort of summarize the plots. We do our best to do non-spoilers in this call, but we do our best. So if we spoil anything, we apologize, but we do have sort of an honest conversation that we don't prepare for, so we don't know where it's going, but it's always really fun. So Amy Tan. Amy Tan was born in Oakland, California on February 19th, 1952. So she is 69 years old. She is the child of Chinese immigrants who came here fleeing the Chinese Civil War. Her dad was an engineer and also a Baptist preacher. So that really, is part of Amy Tan's upbringing. Tragedy struck Amy's life when she was 15 years old, when her father and her brother, within 6 months of each other, died of brain tumors, which I think is just such a strange thing for both of them to have. They were very different in age, but she lost them both in her 15th year of life. Her mom wound up moving her and her younger brother to Switzerland after that, where she finished her high school career. And it was in Switzerland where she found out that her mother had actually been married before in China. And she had 4 siblings that she didn't know about. The son from that relationship had passed, but she had 3 half-sisters in China, which later became sort of the basis for her most famous book, The Joy Luck Club. She and her mother had a very tumultuous relationship. Her mother threatened to kill her a number of times and then would threaten to kill herself. And it turned out that her grandmother had committed suicide. So it seems like this sort of issue with mental health had been running in the family for some time. Amy then came back to California. She went to San Jose State University, which is right up the road for Brian and I. And she finished her college degree, and she has really been here ever since, which is really great. There's like a local literary hero up the path. She was a business writer for a long time, and she would actually change her name to sound less Asian so that she would get jobs. And while she was a business writer, she wrote the Joy Luck Club, and she had a hard time getting that book published. A couple of things that I found really interesting in her life was that when she was in college, when she was in graduate school for a little bit at Berkeley, her roommate was murdered, and she was the one who had to identify the body. And after she did that, she went mute for a certain period of time, and she just didn't speak. She lost her voice. Which is really interesting. She also got diagnosed or misdiagnosed for a long time with Lyme disease, and then she wound up having Lyme disease. They didn't know what it was, which has led her to have seizures all through her life. And she does talk pretty openly about her issues with mental health, which we see runs in her family. And as a high note, because that's all a lot of stuff, she has been married to her husband since 1974. So that is a long, healthy marriage. They have a house that they built up in San Francisco, and they have been together quite some time. So that's pretty exciting. Amy Tan, I would say, is like an American literary treasure, right? People are really in awe of her at all times. She's written 5 books of fiction, 2 children's books, and a number of nonfiction books. So that's Amy Tan. And is it May that is Pacific Islander Asian History Month, right? So that's why we picked this book and why we're reading it right now. So I'll hand it to Ryan to try to summarize 100 Secret Senses.
That's fascinating. I know that the Joy Luck Club was such a phenomenon. And like the first time I think a lot of Asian Americans really saw themselves in a book or in a movie. And so I think her influence on just American literature is apparent now based on the number of Asian Americans that can get published.
Yes.
So
Well, you
I
said,
think
I think in our call, Ryan, didn't you give a really interesting fact about the Joy Luck Club? Something about it.
yeah, it was the first American movie to have an all Asian cast or predominantly Asian cast, and that wasn't repeated again until Crazy Rich Asians a few years ago. So we still have a long ways to go, but at least the doors have been opened, and we can see how Chinese Americans, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, like they have such an important influence on our culture and in the
Yes.
United States, and we need to appreciate them and really read their stories so we understand their points of view.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, we were talking with our Zoom book club. There are so many amazing Asian American writers putting out work right now. For the
Mhm.
last few years, it's been phenomenal. So, and I think Amy Tan was really the start of that. So, and I think we can't not talk about the fact that she was a member of a very interesting rock band called the Rock Bottom Remainders. And I love, so Wikipedia, this is from Wikipedia, so I'm not creating this. It says she was the lead rhythm dominatrix and backup singer for this band, which included Stephen King and oh, I'm totally blanking on the other party, but they actually toured for quite some time and they raised money for literacy,
Yeah.
which I didn't know. And they were pretty successful. They raised millions of dollars for literacy in the United States. So,
Yeah, Stephen King talks about it in his memoir on writing a little bit and talks about how it was supposed to be just, like a one-time joke, like a fundraiser, but like they enjoyed it so much they kept doing it. So I
yeah,
think that's really amazing that we have a literary rock supergroup.
I love it so much.
So The 100 Secret Senses by Amy Tan is a novel about Olivia and her sister Kwan. Olivia was born in the United States. Her mother and father immigrated to the United States from China. And when Olivia's in high school, her father dies. And soon after, she finds out she has a half sister who lives in China from her father. And she moves here, and that's Kwan. Kwan calls Olivia Libya and has an accent throughout the book, which is quite funny at times. Like I really liked Kwan's voice through this. So it's about their relationship. At the same time, Olivia is in a marriage with Simon, and it's not going so well, and they're separating. Throughout the book, it's also interspersed with Kwan's stories of her alleged past lives. The book starts with her having yin eyes, which means she can see ghosts. And so she tells these stories about ghosts and these past lives in China to Olivia. And so we kind of get both. We kind of get both of these stories like intermixed throughout the book. And then eventually, Kwan convinces Simon and Olivia to go to China to write a magazine article about Chinese food. And Kwan's whole objective is to get them back together.
Yes.
So I think that's what we can say without really spoiling anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those books that it's going to be hard because a lot of the stuff sort of builds on each other. It's one of our more plot-driven novels that we've read for the Spilling Tea Book Club. So we will do our best. But I think we should probably start with Olivia, who is our main narrator, and she could be rather frustrating.
Yeah, she was frustrating. She didn't like Kwan very much. She seemed resentful when she moved over. And, Kwan worshipped her. Even though Kwan was about 10 years older than Olivia, Kwan worshipped Olivia. She wanted to be her. She wanted to be friends with her. And Olivia was kind of a spoiled brat.
Mhm.
And that continued until they were, Olivia was 40 in her 40s, and she still kind of had some resentment and some she was very dismissive to Kwan. She kind of ignored her, kind of made fun of her. So Olivia wasn't exactly sympathetic in this book. And the reason that she was splitting up with Simon didn't feel like a good reason.
Yeah, she was rather selfish. And I think that that is sort of a theme throughout the book, was sort of Olivia's selfishness versus Kwan's unselfishness. I mean, you said it, Kwan adored her sister and had nothing but ever the best of intentions in being a member or involved in her life. But Olivia she definitely came off so self-centered in the book, and it was hard sometimes to want anything good to happen for her because she didn't really do anything to make you feel that sympathy for her.
Yeah. Yeah, it was tough. She was selfish. She was dismissive. And I think I struggled a bit because it was from her point of view. So it was hard to relate to it. And I kind of wanted more from Kwan and some of the other characters. We learned that Kwan is married, and I think she has kids.
Stepchildren, I believe.
Okay. And we barely get any explanation of her life. So it was kind of frustrating in that way. And we had a lot of discussion about that with our book club. Some people found her infuriating. I did feel sympathy towards her, though. I could see that, she wasn't happy. This wasn't what she wanted to do, but she seemed kind of stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And, her husband, Simon, that relationship only went on to prove that it looked like Olivia just had issues with intimate relationships. Her family, her mother, her sister, her husband, she just struggled with sort of the give and take. She did not give very much, but she took quite a bit. And I wanted really bad to feel like she was going to grow. And then as the book goes on, you sort of start to see pieces come together, which I'm not going to go too much in because I don't want to spoil it. But that goes to the thing that I think Kwan is really the heart of this novel, even though she is not the main speaker. And she was just a good person. And I really just loved that about Kwan. And I just thought she was charming and funny. And when she would talk about these past lives of hers, it was, my opinion, one of the best parts of the book, because it was interesting and very mythic and folkloric in a way. And I really appreciated Kwan's voice.
Yeah, I did too. I thought she was really funny, and she was just entertaining to read. The flashbacks or the stories about the alleged past lives, those were very confusing to me at the beginning. I had a hard time following all the characters, and it's about some white missionaries who come to this town in China, and then there's some fighting going on with the current Chinese empire versus other people. And I'm not super familiar with Chinese history, so maybe that was part of it. But I found it confusing. But once I just pushed through and kind of got into the rhythm of it, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really think that by the end of the book, Amy Tan ties everything up. And, all of the stories that kind of feel disjointed eventually come together in a way where you can feel like you understood them. But I agree, there was almost a lack of a reference point for those of us who may not have been familiar with the period of Chinese history we were in, which I would have liked maybe a little bit more just to give context to what was going on in this tiny community. But that being said, the stories were entertaining in and of themselves. They were tragic at times. Kwan had not only a rough beginning to this life, but if these were her past lives, she's had a rough couple of lives.
Yes, that is true. And maybe this indicates maybe a weakness on Amy Tan's part. She has been criticized that her writing of China has been from an American point of view, not from someone who was born, raised, even extensively visited China. So I think that might be part of it too, is that she just doesn't know that history as well.
Yeah.
Or she just isn't, able to explain it in a way. But I still really enjoyed the book and I really liked the story. And I thought the ending was it wrapped it up nicely. And I felt very satisfied, I would say.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this in our Zoom book club a little bit. So this is probably the most commercial fiction. I hesitate to use that term, but this book felt very of a time to a lot of us. And we tend to read these authors that are a little bit more meditative. There's not always a ton of stuff going on. It's more about the person, it's more about the thoughts and stuff like that. This book was driven by a plot that I could get behind and really felt like, okay, I want to know what's going to happen next. Oh, well, that was a turn I didn't see expecting, which I really appreciated. I don't know that I read a ton of books like that. So I was really bought into that narrative structure. And I thought she did an amazing job of keeping me, on that line pulled throughout the book. And I really, by the end of it too, I really liked it. I did feel like it was very 1990s. In sort of structure and tone, and the language isn't super complicated and any of that, but it is a book that you can just sit down and sort of plow through and really enjoy the characters.
Yeah, I agree. And it felt very much of the 90s because of the selfishness, because of kind of the setting. Like it felt very, it felt dated in a way that we haven't read a lot of books for this book club that haven't felt dated or as much. So it was interesting. I would definitely recommend everybody read it because I really enjoyed it, and I will look for another Amy Tan book to read.
Yeah, and I think that it's a good book club book because I think there's a lot to discuss. It was interesting to see how many people in our club thought that it was from one perspective, or some people thought it was all one thing and there was less reality to it. And, so I thought that led to some really interesting conversations. And when you finish the book, you can sort of have those discussions. And this was Amy Tan's third book. And it was the first book that wasn't focused on mother-daughter relationships, which when I explained her history, you understand why she was so into that. But this is more sister relationships. And I think the complicated nature of sibling relationships was really well done. I mean, it was complicated, selfish on one end, heartfelt on another, but it never felt trite. It felt very real to me.
Yeah, and this was an immigration story. This was a story about identity. This was a story about, like you said, intimate relationships and like the ability to form them as somebody who is not always may not feel 100% American, but also isn't Chinese. And so between these worlds, it was really interesting. And I think Amy Tan handled it really well.
Yeah, I agree. And some of the, I don't know if I want to use the word folkloric, but some of the mythic, sort of I don't know what the word I want, but was very charming. You know what I mean? It's just like sort of had a way of just making everything feel very wholesome at times. Like I was feeling like I got the background of Kwan through these stories that I really appreciated. And it's funny, for a book not from Kwan's perspective, she may have been the character that was the most flushed out in her sensibilities to me. Like I really thought I
Mm.
understood who she was and why she
Yeah.
was doing what she did. And I really appreciated that about the story.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So Ryan, Amy Tan, this was your first Amy Tan?
Yes.
Okay. So I've read The Joy Luck Cub and I've read this one, and I definitely feel like Amy Tan has a certain style. But there was quite some time between her fourth and her fifth book. So I'm interested to read her latest book and see if there's been any change in her style. But I mean, she's very successful, so she may not feel she needs to change her style at all.
That's
But
true. Yeah.
so you said you'd read another Amy Tan?
I'd read another Amy Tan book. I tried to read The Joy Luck Club a few times and I just couldn't get into it. It could have just been my mood at the time.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just that her books are kind of hard to get into, but once you do, they're good. And I was kind of dreading this one the most out of all the books we chose this year because I thought, oh, this is going to be maybe cheesy or it's going to be not well written. And I ended up loving it. So I will definitely read something else by her.
Yeah, I had to read Joy Luck Cub in college for a modern American literature class. And I remember dissecting it and all of that. So it has that in my brain when I think about that book. But I remember adoring the film. I just loved the movie of that book. So it always, I think, will have a sort of a soft place in my heart. But I'm glad that we read her because I feel like she's important. And I feel like we read a book that maybe not a lot of people have read.
Yeah, me too. Great choice.
So Ryan, Teacups, what are you giving it?
I really enjoyed this. And maybe because I was so surprised that I enjoyed it, I gave it 5 teacups.
Well, I really liked it actually quite a bit. It only got 4 teacups for me, but I highly, highly recommend it. I think people will really enjoy it if they give it a chance.
Yep,
so
I agree.
Ryan, what are we reading for next month?
So June is Pride Month around the world. And so we wanted to read kind of an LGBT classic. And so we chose The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. This might go by the name Carol in your country or in the bookstore. This was made into a movie starring Cate Blanchett titled Carol.
And a movie that did very well. It was nominated for Best Picture. It was nominated for she and the supporting actress, who I apologize, I don't remember her name, were both nominated for Best Actor and Best Supporting Actress.
It was it Mara Rooney or
oh maybe yes
the other Rooney? So. There's like 2 Rooneys. One of them.
That will be kind of fun if you're looking for something to do this summer, to read our latest book and then maybe watch the film and compare and contrast. So Patricia Highsmith is a woman that is not without controversy in her own world. So I'm really excited. I've only read The Talented Mr. Ripley by her, and that was years ago. So I'm super excited to see what this book has to bring to the table.
Yeah, me too. I think it'll be interesting, and I think we'll have some good discussions about it. We're going to meet on Zoom to talk about this book on Saturday, June 5th.
Saturday, June 5th, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you want to participate, please feel free to email either Ryan or myself. All of our information is down below in the description box. We would love to have you. I know things are starting to open up a little bit, but I hope that you'll continue to join us because we have really been loving hosting this book club.
Yep. It's been a great time, and we have such great conversations and such different perspectives. I always gain a lot more out of our conversations because of that. So I really, really have loved this book club so far.
And it's international. We have people from all over the world that join the book club. So it's very fascinating for us to get perspectives on sort of these women of either really of Britain or the US from all of these different perspectives. And the conversations have been great. So, well, thank you for joining us today. As always, we wish you happy reading, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.